Growing up gay and disabled, I didn't think that there was a lot of opportunity for me. I mean, I didn't think that I would ever become like a television writer. I didn't think that I would be making my own show. I just didn't think that was possible. Like, that wasn't even something I considered or even entered my brain. When there's no space for you in the world, you have to literally barge your way through and make your own space.
There was never anyone that looked like me. There was never any Indian people on TV, and even the Indians on TV were extremely stereotypical, or it was like Apu from The Simpsons. I like that in Special, I'm a person first, and then being Indian happens to be part of the person that I am.
I have never felt like I've seen myself being represented on TV, which I think kind of caused a lot of psychic damage. Because I'm thinking about what was there as a reference point when I was growing up, which was like Queer as Folk, which was like all like amazing, like gay men who were hot and like, you know, having sex like porn stars. And I wasn't that. When you don't see yourself being reflected back at you on screen, you're implicitly told that you don't matter, that your story is not worth being told. It affects the way you move through the world.
Representation is very important to me. Number one, because it means I get work. But I think representation humanizes people. And me, you know, ranting to some close-minded person isn't going to make a difference to them. But if they see me on TV and I make them laugh, I feel like that's how I can affect change in this world. You can influence them through something like media just by being like, hey, that person looks different than me, and I have some kind of notions about who I think those kind of people are like, but she's on TV talking about sex and making me laugh and walking around in a bikini and doing cannonballs in a pool, and maybe not all Indian people are the same.
I was just very, very frustrated with the lack of representation in TV and film, and I feel like I'm constantly thinking about like things like, why has that not been done? Like, I'm thinking of a concept and I'm just like, why has that not been made? I don't understand. It's like we're 2000 and late on all of these things. And so I feel very lucky to be living in a time in Hollywood where we're actually having conversations about diversity, inclusivity, representation, because we weren't even having it like 4 years ago. Like, we just realized women were funny like 3 years ago. And so I feel like kind of disability is one of the last frontiers. We're like the, you know, one of the last marginalized group to get any kind of attention. And
my character in the show is important for people to see, not just because there aren't as many Indians out there, but also, you know, you kind of see a one-size-fits-all type of woman on TV most of the time. And when you see a woman who isn't a size 0, it's all about her weight, or it's all about how she's struggling with her weight, and she's a sad sack, and she wishes she could lose weight. My character is a proud size 12, and she doesn't want to change a thing about her. So I think it's important to see someone that isn't a size 0 and confidently walk around and love the way she looks, and not as a joke. But there is no joke about this. I look great. So.
The thing is, diversity and representation, it's just reflecting the world that you live in. It's not like you're telling, like, it's not like you're presenting anything insane or hard to understand. You're just presenting the world as it's lived. I get very overwhelmed by the magnitude of being one of the first gay disabled leads on television, because I know that I can't speak for everyone, and I would never claim to, but I hope that this show allows Hollywood to wake up regarding disability. I think we're ready to see the value in telling other people's stories. It just is better for everyone as a whole when there's just more stories being told.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. And thank you for checking in the chat box for those people who have already joined us. I'm going to introduce to you in just a second the wonderful Peter Royston, who is here with me right now. But before we get started, I'd just like to run a couple of housekeeping slides for those who have joined us for the first time. If you've not been part of a TheatreArtLife webinar, we just want to make sure that you are encouraged to ask questions in the chat box on the right whenever you would like to, and me and Peter will start to answer those questions as we go throughout tonight's session. If for any reason you drop out, you can log back in anytime via the email link that's sent you, or press reconnect at the top of of the Webinar Jam platform. And if you have dodgy internet and it's intermittent, then a replay is available and will be sent to you personally 24 hours after this session. So that will be there. And we've now got closed captioning on our YouTube site. So we are working towards being more acceptable this year in 2021 with TheatreArtLife, and going to work hard with that. And Peter is going to teach us about some of that today. So Peter Royston, he, him, his, is an equity stage manager based in New York and originally from the Bay Area. His credits include Blue Man Group, the Public Theatre, the Lark, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, San Jose Repertory Theatre, TheatreWorks, among many others. Since 2017, Peter has become a vocal advocate and ally to the disabled community, specifically through his lived experience as a white gay man with cerebral palsy. Peter, welcome to TheatreArtLife. Are you there? Oh, I can't hear you. Is your microphone on?
Hi. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for joining with us today. And you're talking to us from New York, I understand, yeah?
Yes, I am.
Lovely.
Right next to the
nice
theater.
I wanted to start with from a very simple sense, and you can tell me if I need to bring up any slides and we can read through those as well. I'd like to start with from a very simple perspective in terms of defining disability. And for you, what's your definition and what's the best way for people to talk about it, what terminology and what approach should everyone have when they're bringing up the topic of people with disabilities?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to give a description of myself for some of the folks that I am a white male with glasses and I have short brown hair. And today I'm wearing a blue paisley shirt. I'm sitting on a red couch, which you may see, and I'm in front of a gray wall. There's a little blue picture on the wall as well. And my preferred pronouns are he, him. To start off with, there are two main definitions, I think, with ableism and disability. And I think it would be good just to pull up the slides for this.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'll read this off to you. So our first slide is on a blue background, and there's a few blue squares in the top right corner, and the definition is written in white. This is a definition for ableism. It is a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societal constructed ideas for normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and or ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. And I during quarantine this past summer, I was part of the Crip Camp virtual experience, which was taken out in response to the Crip Camp documentary that was produced on Netflix. And it was a group of disabled leaders talking to the disabled community. And I found this this definition very important. So.
Great. You want to go to the next one as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Disability is our next slide. It's a white backdrop. Disability is in pink, and there's some pink squares in the right corner and a blue line at the bottom. A disability is a condition which makes it more difficult for a person to do certain activities or interact with the world around them. These conditions or impairments may be cognitive, developmental, intellectual, mental, physical, sensory, or a combination of multiple factors. Impairments causing disability may be present from birth or occur during a person's lifetime. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities defines disability as long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments which in interaction with various barriers may hinder a person's full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. I do think what's important in the disability definition, something to be aware of, is that it is the largest minority, and about 25% of the population identifies as disabled. And how that relates to theater is about 5% of roles in film are disabled characters, and about 1% of those are given to disabled actors.
Wow. And do you have the same, is there similar statistics in live theatre, or that's not really quantified?
I think that was, I don't want to speak clearly, but I think that was overall in the performing arts.
So film and theatre.
Based off of the surveys, the stage management survey and our diversity report from Actors Equity, which is the American, not the full global, about 5% of the stage managers identify as disabled. And there is a margin of error because there are some people that choose not to answer that question, which till about 2017, I was one of those people.
And how do you feel personally about those statistics, especially given the fact that, you know, some of the roles of people, say, playing disabled people aren't actually being played by disabled people? How do you feel about that?
I think that it's sad because I think that there's an untapped resource in talent and stories and moving the world and our community and our industry into a more equitable space. There are answers in how to make theater and the world more accessible, and that conversation needs to be had with the disabled community. I think that there's been a social upheaval and a social reckoning in this country, and I think it's extended to some echoes around the world, and that those conversations about what is equitable and fair and safe, that conversation needs to include accessibility, or you're not addressing the full anti-oppression practices.
And I really think this is what I really want to dig in today, and think about, you know, how can the individuals and also companies talk about accessibility, inclusion in the arts. But before we get into those, you know, what can we do and how do people work on that? Because I think it's a huge thing to unpack, actually. We'll be here for hours. Yep. Tell us a little bit about your experience, if you're willing to share, you know, in how your disabilities influenced your career. Again, specifically not in terms of what you think you're capable of or whatever, but external influences and the perception of disability in your world. Yeah.
Well, something that I need to acknowledge is that I do hold privilege. I have been somebody that has been able to pass as an able-bodied person in a lot of circumstances. I have limited mobility in my right side, and that affects me differently based off of when I'm tired or when I'm overwhelmed or when I'm stressed or when I've definitely experienced two instances that I can, for examples. One was sort of at the beginning of my career, and I was working at a new regional theater, and we were doing our first rehearsal, and we stepped through the transition, and I was able to do it. But the director didn't like the way I did it. So at the end of the rehearsal, the production stage manager it said, "I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to do this. Oh, that's the way theater is." And at that time, I took that in, and it's like, people make their choices. But in terms of who's capable to that job, I was able to do the transition. And the only reason why was that the first time I did it, it didn't look smooth. And I think there's a few things to unpack just in that circumstance. Is that one, like, it could take anybody more than one time to make something work well and look smoothly, and maybe it looks a little bit different the first time. And then also, how do you judge what that picture is supposed to look like, and do you want to include a diverse group of mobilities as well as people on stage? I think also related to that experience was the main actor was pegged as a diva by the other assistant and the crew, and they spent a lot of time complaining about how difficult she was. And I usually take that as a call to find out how to work with somebody. And and we worked with her, and one of the things that she asked for was to have a blanket thrown over her at the end of the show. And she was on stage, had her kids were dying. She had been on stage. She has this momentous, epic performance, and she wants a blanket thrown over her stage. But and so I did that every night. And at the end of the run, she gave me a hug and said, "Thank you so much for your love." And I know that same courtesy was not relayed to my colleague, and I think that it's interesting. Just like the reason why I'm sort of saying this is that I'm curious, where I'd like to ask everyone the question of what you consider what is the best, who is best, who is most able to do a job, and what do you really need from a stage manager, and does that vary, and do you need all types of abilities, and what is so.
And do you think that, before you get onto that second example, I think this year you're saying that you feel that shift has been made in terms of people want to have a bit more representation in diversity and a bit more of a real mirror of real life. You think that 2020 has been, or now we're in 2021, but 2020 was a time for us to stop, breathe, and take a look at that?
Yeah, I think we're given an opportunity to look at how we structure theater and to ask ourselves questions. And my hope is that there will be flexibility and that will be an ongoing conversation. There's not just one way that we can change everything and that will work for everyone, but it's asking everybody, what is your access needs and how can we best serve you? And do you want those? Because if you do want a diverse group of people, and if you do want everyone to excel and to bring all their ideas and to work in a collaborative environment, you need to allow for that space. And different people need different things.
And different people have different things to offer as well, right? So, So tell us about that second example that you've had in your career.
So more recently, I went to an interview and I was waiting, sitting at the bench, and the interviewer came up to me and went to shake my hand, and I shook her hand, and she immediately clocked me. And she gave me a look, and we went on with our interview, and it was a fine interview. I don't know if we, I'll just leave it. And then she asked for my references, and I got a call from one of my references that said that the interviewer had asked what was wrong with me, did I have a debilitating disease, how was this going to affect my work? And so from my perspective, what if somebody really wanted to know or was concerned, you would ask me at the interview. And I think since that time, I've tried to come out and just be open with that I have cerebral palsy, what my needs are, what my access needs are, and to open up that conversation. But still at that time, and even now, I'm very curious about how people talk about it and what kind of misconceptions and stigmas people have about disability without.
Do you think that comes from a sense of, it's hard to really say, I guess, but, a lot of people who are quite ignorant about disabilities and how they work and what people are capable of, and a bit awkward about having that conversation. And you said that you now bring that up in your interviews, potentially maybe to cut that off at the pass. How would somebody who's interviewing you, how would you want to be approached?
Well, I think having open-ended questions, so I think leading by example. So one thing I also did not do was start off and say what my access needs are, which is something that I hope gets included in the conversation of introductions when we add our preferred pronouns and a visual description. And my access needs are that I have limited mobility in my right side, which means that for in stage management, that I will need to work out if I do cue lights, or how the booth is set up, or backstage choreography. But I can figure that out. But and I have aphasia, so when I am tired or overwhelmed, I may stutter or slur. And also, if that would include, and that extends to written work. So if I'm going to send out a mass email to an entire chorus and to the entire company at 12 o'clock at night, somebody should probably check that, or they need to be aware that if there's a dumb error, that's why. It's not because Peter or somebody with aphasia is not detail oriented, doesn't know what the information was, didn't check themselves. It is because of this condition.
Well, I think I can join you in having sent dumb emails at midnight as well. So I don't think that's.
And since I've talked about that in interviews, pretty much every stage manager says that, and it's nice to relieve that stress. But also, as somebody who has been surrounded all their life by internalized ableism, and basically growing up trying to be normal instead of actually just being the best, just being Peter, that affects me. So, but it's nice to just open that up, and of course we all laugh and we work it all out. And since I've been more open about my disability, I feel much more at home in my skin, and I see how it's exciting to find out, to kind of see how you can creatively do your work and why you're different. I get to do the show a little bit differently. How I ended up learning Blue Man Group is different than how most people do. I have to do a few different things than most people do, and that makes me special and unique. And I have a little bit different flavor, of course, of calling a show than the other stage managers, as we all do. We all have our own styles. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think your point is also too, something that a mistake for me, I can maybe brush off as a bad mistake at midnight, but it might, for you become self-conscious about that, because then it might reflect on what people may judge. Am I right? What people may judge about you because that mistake was made. And so how did you build, or would you recommend people build confidence in talking about their disability or their accessibility needs?
I think knowing yourself and knowing what you need, and knowing that it's okay to actually state what you need, it's actually a sign of strength to say what you do need and what you are capable of. It's not a weakness. So I feel like I've gained strength by getting more and more used to talking about what I need and how it will affect the work. And of course, each show is different. So, and some things may never come up. Sometimes, there's no error. Well, there's no problem, or there's nothing really for me. I can figure out my physical space well, or what I need to do easily. But also, if there's a question, what I felt like was a trigger even in the interview, is someone doesn't know exactly what's going on too, that also leaves them open to wonder and to be concerned. So if I'm open, then that relieves the stress. That's what this is. So if I'm doing this, it's nothing. I'm capable of stage managing a show. I've called a show. I've worked with many different kinds of companies. I know I can do my work. Why are you concerned? No, this is why, and it doesn't affect my work, but this is how it will show up in certain instances.
Yeah. Letting them know what they're going to see and experience from your perspective. Yeah. So in terms of, it's a big topic, because I think about accessibility and inclusion in the arts, and you said ableism and disabilities, it's a very broad spectrum, right? So your needs is different from somebody who may have, be on the spectrum, or a different disability, et cetera, et cetera. So where do we start? Where do we start in being more inclusive?
I think we may want to share this later, but there's a great article that that Ryan J. Haddad shared, which is the Disability Scorecard. But I think also before that, there's just a few basic questions, which I think I have a slide for, which I think are questions you can ask yourself or your company.
Okay. Is that on the first one?
Yeah, I think.
The
orange.
1 second. I've got the disability scorecard. Is it here? Is it?
Yeah, it's just the one slide. It's the accessibility one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just go that. So next.
Oh, it's a different file.
Okay. So not this one.
No.
Okay. I only have two there.
Orange and blue. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we can pull up the disability scorecard. I think that.
All right. Let's do that one. Yeah.
So this is something that Ryan J. Haddett, who's a writer and actor, wrote to and published in the American Theater magazine, as well as the Long Wharf Theater. And I think it's a great place to start and asking your theater questions or to be aware of. We can go to them. So Ryan, this is a blue. Slide is blue with, and there's a pink backdrop for the words. Ryan J. Haddett is a playwright and actor with Cerebral Palsy who wrote the Disability Scorecard. It was published on AmericanTheatre.org. We are tired of being tertiary. Here is a partial list of ways to center disabled artists and audiences going forward.
And just so everybody, just so everybody knows, we'll share you these resources with our post-webinar email. So if you're trying to screen capture them or anything, they'll come in the email after the session. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
And this slide is a pink backdrop with a yellow highlight for disability scorecard at the top, and the list of requests for questions is in white writing. So program work centered by disabled playwrights, program work predominantly featuring disabled characters, even if the character is not explicitly identified as disabled, but the action of the play or context of the story suggests that they might be. Please stop and ask yourself, wait, is this actually a disabled character? Sometimes the answer is yes. Make subsequent creative decisions accordingly. Cast 30. Cast disabled actors to play disabled characters. I mean, of course, but I had to say it. Hollywood is still guilty, and sometimes theater is too. I don't have the sense of humor that's in some of these, which is Ryan. Cast disabled actors and play characters not written to be disabled. Though I think I'll let people read the rest of it. Can we go on to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
If you program to play that featured disability 5 seasons ago, or 4 or 3 or 2 seasons ago, that is not enough. It's irresponsible to virtually ignore an entire community for years at a time, and you can't use one positive example from the past to justify the absence of inclusion in the present or future. Consistency is crucial. You have to keep searching for the projects, stories, and talent that will be that bring disability to your stages. A piece of theater can still represent disability without being about disability. Hire disabled directors and choreographers. Hire disabled designers and technicians. Next one is in a yellow backdrop, and the highlight is in green for disabled scorecard. If your scenic designer begins prior to your casting process, ask if the accessibility of your design concept excludes performers with certain mobility disabilities from being in your play, musical. If the concept is exclusionary, consider a more universal design approach. Hire disabled stage managers. Disabled people are great at problem solving because we have constantly adapted to a world that is not built for us. Hire disabled front of house, box office, and full-time administrative staff. If you require a disabled consultant, hire one. It is not every disabled person's job to act as a disabled consultant, particularly if they are not being compensated for that role. Do better than the minimum when it comes to audience accessibility.
Great call. Great points.
And then just for the front of house, which I think was touched on in a previous webinar too, is accessibility is about so much more than mobility. Audience accessibility includes, but is not limited to, audio description and large print playbills for blind and low vision patrons, captioning, preferably open caption, and sign language interpretation for the deaf and hard of hearing patrons. These do not cancel each other out. They are different services, and different people need different things. So please plan to offer both, along with assistive listening devices. Relaxed performances for autistic and neurodiverse patrons.
Wow, that's the last slide. That's
yep.
That's a lot.
And that's available on the American Theater Magazine if you want to see his Ryan's full article. And I think that list pretty much, or at least touches on most of the main, or all of the main points related to theater. And I think that a key to that to all that is that there's a minimum work that can be done, and then there's like keeping on asking yourself to get better. And I think that's an internal questions that you need to ask, like how do you work and how do you set up your production if you're a gatekeeper or a manager, and are you doing the minimum, or are you actually reaching out? And what do you actually want? Because if you really want an equitable space that works for everyone, you need to address ableism, which is rampant and sometimes not totally obvious. It's a hidden, or it's an overlooked minority. It's an overlooked issue in a lot of circumstances.
Oh, that's great. So if we're talking about that from a producer's point of view or a company manager, they might have ways and means to execute on that task list. What about those who are, say, in the cast, or a backstage technician or a lighting person, who are not there, who cannot influence that necessarily, but how could they become an ally to that community while being in the arts scene?
I think addressing the issues and asking yourself kind of like a question. I mean, these questions, and just like, have you announced like your needs and goals and priorities? Have you led by an example? I think it's are your needs in alignment with the rest of your team? Have you looked at your production calendar and seen that it works for everyone? Can you shift that calendar if it needs to? How do you allow for proper planning of a piece? And are you aware of everyone else's access needs? I think also that the main issues to just be aware of is that there's is time. Like, how much time does it take to set up a space, and the planning. And direct communication. And I think a lot of those ideas, it seems like there's a conception that if you have to accommodate something for a disabled person, that it will take more time, that it will cost more. And that is also another stigma. So I think if you're trying, as an individual, trying to open up and be an ally to the community, that you address those needs and be aware of the facts.
And learn, I guess, learn about and speak to people like yourself and other people that have and live and exist in that world, so that you understand what their needs are, right? So you can support them. If you're working with Peter, we can come and have that conversation with you, right?
Yeah, and there's so much varied experiences. So, I mean, I know several people who live with cerebral palsy, and how it presents itself and how it affects their lives is different, and also what they do is different. So, like Ryan J. Haddad is one person, and Greg Magzala is another person who's definitely a creative person, and how that physically looks and how that affects us on an intellectual perspective is also different. And so that each person's experience is different, which is why I think it's very helpful and important to give access needs and to open up that discussion. So I think one really easy way to be an ally is to actually state your access needs, and also ask someone else, do you have any access needs, or is there any way else we can support you? I think having an open, honest conversation is really helpful. And I think it is also an untapped, exciting project, is to really build up our community and our theater industry at this point to work towards being fully accessible to all, and that we are not actually there yet addressing other systems of oppression that have come up in this last year, unless we're addressing this. It's not, we're still not there yet. If we leave this out, we've missed the ball this year.
Katie Anna McConnell says, we also need to ban non-readmission policies in theatres. It's such a huge barrier for some disabilities. So do you mean, Katie, if people leave the theatre that they can't come back in? I guess that's the thing. I think from country to country and place to place, that can be something that is a rule, and that is, if people do need to take a bit of time out. You know, when we spoke about the accessible theatre last week, and we talked about neurodiverse audience members sometimes need to take a break from the stimulation. So, you know, ideally, in an ideal world, every theatre show is accessible for neurodiverse and that, but there is a certain, would you say, expectation on theatre behaviour and protocol. It's not a written protocol, but there is a lot of people that comment on, you know, a rowdy audience member.
Yeah, I mean, because in some shows, like, even I know, even just in a different and also another perspective too, is that like how people watch theater too is different, and some of those conversations have been had even with Ain't Too Proud to Beg, the director and the creative person for the show. Dominique said like that wanted to allow anybody to express themselves however they wanted to and experience the theater. So it wasn't that you had to be quiet and never and don't clap and laugh and engage with the show. You can actually, that there are these strict systems in place of how we have to attend theater, how we have to go to theater, and how we go through tech, how we perform, and that perhaps there are alternate ways to do that, and perhaps we can do that in different ways. And I do think that the non-readmittance thing is something that should be addressed, that doing one autism-friendly performance and then one closed caption performance is technically not enough. That I know that there's different ways that people have to look at how they move towards having that more accessible to more of the disability community. But I've seen one theater that they do have a few specific performances, but then also if you can't make it, they have the services to give you closed captions on a device where they can arrange it for you to come on any night, that they don't want to exclude you if you can't make that specific night. And I think that is also important.
It's interesting for me because, you know, I'm speaking to you from the other side of the world, and also audiences around the world have different flavors and expectations and behaviors. And so I have lived in a world that lacks, you know, what you're talking about, Katie, that expectation that people can't come back in. Although I have worked on shows where that was back in Australia, where that was certainly the protocol. You know, I worked on a show in Asia where, you know, we'd announced no cell phones at the top of the show, and the minute that the show started, there's a million cell phones coming out to video the opening of the show, and there was nothing you could do about it. So I feel like I'm quite relaxed in that, and I enjoy the audience being as participatory in process, but I also understand that the reverence that people have in the theatre and that. So there's got to be a happy medium, I guess, in terms of allowing that. It's certainly something that I've taken my young children, and my son is a very specific kind of child as well, and I've always been a little bit anxious to take him to theatre and have him behave appropriately. And it's a difficult thing as a parent to be self-conscious about that, you know, and you want to be welcomed into that. And I think, you know, so in a certain sense, although I can't identify with your stories, Peter, I have experienced that in some way, shape or form. And it's really important that we try to do as much as possible. For people that are who have disabilities and are having issues that in terms of their own workplace, you know, success, is there a support network? Is there a support network, or are there resources that people can get, especially specifically for the arts, that people can get or make strides in with their work, because there's those resources available? I mean, maybe I'll just talk about the States, because you probably don't know about anywhere else, but for you, have you had support?
Well, I mean, I've reached out to people, and I mean, there's definitely I have support from several performers, and I feel like I have connections through that. And definitely going through the Crip Camp group, I've gained some other connections, and I think that's where I found, especially talking about disability, more resources or support. Definitely other people who are colleagues of mine and friends of mine who fit in other intersections of oppression. I also feel a lot of support from them, and that we get a lot of strength. One thing that I'm still missing is having a larger network of disabled stage managers specifically. And as of now, I know 3 people. And so I hope that opens up as more people feel more comfortable to talk about their disability and their experiences, because I know they are out there. I think that's.
Well, that's fine. If you, you know, what would be your hopes for the industry moving forward post 2020, and, you know, in the next 5 years with regards to disability and accessibility?
I think that I hope that people address like the items listed in the disability scorecard, and that there's representation in all aspects of our industry. So, and that like includes the critics, that includes the directors, that includes all aspects of it. And I hope that able-bodied colleagues hold themselves accountable. And I think that doing one play by one disabled person is not enough. And I do hope that, just as a reminder, like if you aren't addressing if you aren't addressing ableism, then you aren't addressing anti-racism fully.
That's a good point. Dana has a good question. How would you recommend for stage managers assisting collecting information on what everyone's access needs are, and then keeping that private? And with that in mind, would it be a good idea to ask what your access needs are on the audition sheet? What would you think to do with that?
Well, yeah, and that's something I think we didn't talk about. Like, I have a little bit of a difficulty with disability being a private matter, because I think that is part of the problem, and that of course becomes this gray area, because I think there is also a difference between disability and disease or disability and other health matters. So and it's personal for everyone, and if somebody doesn't want to disclose it, they don't have to. I think what I would say, what I envision is that when we do introductions at the beginning of the day or the first rehearsal, and you do your meet and greet, and you say, "Hi, my name is Peter. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a white male with glasses and brown hair and a blue shirt. I am currently on the land of the Lenape, And also my access needs are, or something to be aware of is that I have a cerebral palsy, which affects my right side, and it may, I have aphasia. So if my speech gets slurred, or if you get an email from me that has a few errors in it, that's what that is. And you can leave at that and say some other things may come up, but we'll address those as we move forward. Please share any access needs that you feel comfortable expressing, and if you do not feel comfortable expressing them, you can put it in your intake sheet, or you can come talk to me privately. And I think that is about setting up a safe space to also allow people to come talk to you about it. But if people don't know that you are even aware of it or that you care, no one may ask. And some people may not even be aware of it. And some people also may have different access needs as the process goes on. So, and might not even be aware of it. I don't think it's necessarily even just about disabled. You don't have to be disabled to have access needs.
You're right. Thank you for that. MM also asked, instead of retroactivity, include accessibility in the creation of the production, create internships for disabled students to get more disabled people involved in the industry, which is a good point, because maybe people don't go into the industry from the outset because they feel that it's not for them, or it's not inclusive enough. Do you think it should start earlier than it does, Peter?
For
education and opportunities for people with disabilities, and offering internships, getting them to encourage them in schools and, say, universities to be in the arts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, from like America's perspective, I've been very. I always look to other countries or something like that have theater training in the art that's just like mandatory for everyone at a preliminary stage. And I think when you're exposed to the arts and to theater right away, then you figure out if you want to be a part of it, and you know if you want to have a voice in it. I think I can't speak for what it's like in other places, but I think that opening it up and having that open discussion of, do you want to try this, and finding a way to do that would be really helpful, and to have a more openness to see what people are capable of, and instead of telling people no. And I think that's more of a cultural shift that could shift and open up. But none of these things are just going to be like a one answer and we solve it and we set up a space and it's going to be it's going to solve all the problems and issues. I think as long as we're human beings, this is going to be an issue that needs to be worked on. But right now, it's not being worked on. So I think that's why it's actually creative. It's an ongoing creative project to be anti-racist, to be anti-oppressive, to be to battle anti-ableism practices, and to have a more equitable space that uplifts everybody and to have new voices.
I totally agree. And like you said, it's a good point you make about the cultural, from culture to culture, there's certain levels of people addressing these issues. And I won't name countries or places that I've worked with, but there's places that are very, very far from even having a conversation like this. So it does take people to participate, advocate, and push for those changes. Even, for example, just on a base value, if I've ever been to Hong Kong, I don't know how anyone with a wheelchair gets around Hong Kong. Like, I have zero clue, because there's just no access. There's stairs everywhere. You have to walk I don't even know how anybody would do that. And yet I am sure there are lots of disabled people in Hong Kong, yet that's just not a city that has been designed, and the infrastructure is not there to let people even get around the city. And we're not even talking about the arts, right? So that layer is, and I think that's why I'm really enjoying these conversations and this series on accessibility, because I'm learning a lot, and if you don't know about it, and if you're not learning about it, then you can't advocate for it. Ignorance is really, you can't do anything when you don't know. So these are the reasons why we're trying to have these conversations. I want to flip on the flip side of what you hope for the industry. And before I want to ask you your concerns about the industry moving forward, what I would feel my concern is, yes, we've had the time to have this conversation now, but when we come back to putting shows on people are going to be at tighter budgets and more ruthless. And even though we've been advocating for this now, is there going to be the space and the time? And I want to touch on the point that you said before. It's not necessarily a cost impacting thing to be more accessible. And so would you have those same concerns, or am I being silly because I'm ignorant, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely physical, like, especially in New York theater, you can say that, like, they have to address, like, access needs for people with mobility issues at the theater and even just getting around the city. Like, that's something that's like a bigger issue. But it is definitely, like, there's so much more to this. So I think that's why, like, the main issues when someone asks for accessible accommodations, that it is not a cost. It's not usually very much of a cost at all or anything. So I think, like, my concerns for the future is that that disabled people still continue to be tertiary objects in the space, and that disability gets left out of the conversations. Even in something that got a lot of likes and supported the Actors Fund this past week was the Ratatouille TikTok musical. Mm-hmm. And in their list of upholding voices, they excluded disability from listing, bringing out new voices and minority groups. And so my fear is that after this great awakening, after 2020, many of the able-bodied colleagues that I have won't address, will keep on addressing anti-racism without considering the other effects of that, which also includes anti-racism with ableism.
Mm. No, that is that. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, so I think that's sorry.
Yeah, and so what can we do? What can TheatreArtLife do, and what can the people here listening to? I know we talked about being an advocate or anything like that, but how do we stay on this topic? How do we continue to push this forward? I
think you need to care. You need to listen. You need to set up a safe space. I think the access check-in is very helpful. And I think you learn about disability yourself. There's several wonderful podcasts. There's Disability Visibility podcast, which is by Lisa Wong leads those. And they have all different areas of conversation around disability and intersectionality related to disability and all areas of the creative development. There's one that I listened to recently with gamers. And it was... but there's so many different aspects, and I am, of course, just one voice as a stage man, my own experience, and I think having more voices, because it is so varied, and there is so much grayness, is that to keep having the conversation to search for those people and to follow them and like them, and there's a lot of great conversations to be had, and there's a lot of similar sentiments that people have had with different flavors, and I think that when we keep on holding this as a priority in our mind, that things will change.
Mm, absolutely. You remind me when you say that. We did a podcast earlier in the year on Black Lives Matter, and one of our speakers had said empathy is a passing emotion, but compassion is forever. And it really struck me, and it still sits with me today, in the fact that, you know, if you're a compassionate person, that tenacity to work on those things doesn't go away. Whereas empathy, you can see a disaster on the news and you can be empathetic to whatever that disaster is, but it's a passing thing, you know, but compassion is something that stays with you. And so I feel like that's what I want to move forward with TheatreArtLife, and also with talking with people like you to continue that conversation and continue to advocate for that on our website and get more accessible, closed captions, all the things, so that, you know, so thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your advice with us today. I really, really appreciate it. Guys, for those who tuned in with us today, we are not finished with our accessibility session. So I just wanted to show you some stuff that's upcoming because we just released a few more today. We've got developing accessibility programs for theatre, and that is with Lisa Carling, who does all of the accessibility programs for Broadway and gets Broadway shows to do accessible performances. So I'm looking really forward to discussing that with her. Not on the accessibility thing, we've got Cirque Life and the pandemic, so we're talking about some video content and the way that some Cirque people have pivoted during the pandemic period. We've got a discussion with actor Sam Humphrey. You may know him from The Greatest Showman, and he's also going to talk about his experience in disabilities and working in the arts. So I'm really looking forward to meeting and talking with him he's in Los Angeles at the moment. And then we've got a masterclass, A Brief History on Makeup and Hair with Megan Mason, who is one of our contributors, who is so passionate about the history of makeup and hair that you would be sure to enjoy that one, because I am looking forward to that as well. So all free, all available to be registered. Head to our website and check that out and register for those. I hope we will see you all again there. Peter, thank you so much again for your time. We will keep in touch now that I have spoken to you a number of times. I'm sure we're going to be connected. And can we also, are you open if anybody wants to ask you any further questions that they weren't confident asking today? Could we share, could you write your email in the comment section there? Would you mind that?
Sure.
So yeah, if anyone wants to have a further discussion and wasn't confident enough to speak up, please reach out to Peter. And also, if you have any questions, feedback, ideas for us at TheatreArtLife on accessibility or any topic as you may wish, please let us know. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks, Peter, for being here.
Thank you.
Bye now.